So hello and welcome to the Great Nurse Podcast. Again, an unfiltered discourse related to nursing and healthcare, health and healthcare, I should say. My name is Amy,
And I'm Sarah, your co-host.
and we are your podcast hosts again for today. So today we'll be talking a little bit about what we did this weekend, and then we'll probably get into talking a little bit about our podcast topic, which is titled "Oh shit, I fucked up," and it's actually about admitting error in healthcare. And for those of you who don't like swearing, I'm sorry, but like we did say, it will be unfiltered, and yeah. So
Yeah.
sorry going ahead. But anyways, let's talk a little bit about our weekend because I think we had a I don't want to say wild weekend, but I think it was actually a pretty fun, good weekend.
Yeah, Amy actually hosted a cookie exchange at her house. And I met some new girlfriends and I met some people that we've worked with in the past. So that was pretty fun, just exchanging some stories and having some girl talk. Amy and I also took a picture that we put up on Instagram and
Yes, our picture.
and we thought, okay, let's just put a face to a name so that people know who we are. It's not the best picture, but it's real and that's who we are.
What are you talking about? It's a great picture.
Yeah,
It's festive. There's lights in the background.
I like how
We
it's
had a couple to drink. It was great.
I like how it's sort of focused on our faces and the background is blurred. I'm not really a
Yeah,
photographer, but I like that effect.
that's because we have to shout out to Lydia and her like badass camera. Like
I know.
my camera can't take pictures like that. So
Was it an iPhone? I don't even remember.
yeah, I think she said it was like an iPhone XR. So
Oh,
I don't know, my iPhone is like super old. I think I have like a 6S.
okay.
So maybe one of these days I'll be able to upgrade.
Mhm.
Even my work phone is better than my personal phone. So,
That is really
ah,
sad.
well.
And your phone,
Is
the
it?
battery just goes all the time. I've never seen it more than 50%.
Yeah, well, I do have like I forget to charge my phone quite frequently. So lots of people will be like, oh, I was trying to get you. And I'm like, yeah, my phone's been dead. Or pretty much by the time I get home, I kind of tuck it away. Because anybody who really wants to contact me, they'll know how to get a hold of me. So,
Right.
and my phone has been through the ringer. Like, I mean, you've seen my case, right? It's all like, it's an OtterBox, but it looks like it's been destroyed.
Well, I mean, your friend at the cookie exchange, we have the same phone, and when we pulled it out and put it side by side, I was like, man, mine's so grimy compared to hers. And we took our covers off just to look at the back to ensure we did have the same phone. I'm like, oh my God, my cover is so dirty. It's supposed to be clear,
Oh, well,
but
whatever.
but
You're
it's
a nurse.
I need to get a Virox wipe and actually disinfect it and get all the grubby fingerprints off.
Yeah, I hear you. That's what I use to clean my phone. Like I use either those like special wipes or just, your everyday Lysol wipes.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, you know what I've used actually to clean my phone? This is really crazy. Hand sanitizer.
Oh, I use baby wipes. I use that too because I have them handy still.
That's so
You're
funny.
probably past the baby wipe stage, so you don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah, I'm past the baby wipes stage, but you can use baby wipes for other things, but that could probably be another podcast topic. Oh my God. It's super embarrassing.
Yeah.
Um, so we are going to talk about today about like admitting error and how that actually comes to fruition. How do nurses do it? How do other healthcare professionals do it? Are we good at doing it? Like, what do you think? What do you think about how we are in terms of admitting error in healthcare?
Well, I think when you're a student, just going back to the beginning, you are really conscious of doing the right thing and making sure that you cover all your bases. So when you're a student, it's actually safe to admit error because I mean, you're working with a preceptor or maybe a clinical instructor, and it's okay, I think, to say that you made a mistake because you're not really doing anything that's really high risk. So you kind of just admit error and you maybe write a little reflective journal article about it and then you're done with it or whatever. But when you're working on the unit, I think it's really dependent on workplace culture as to whether you feel safe to admit error and what your workplace actually does about it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
like I agree with that to a point because I don't know. I've also seen within my practice, especially when it comes to nursing students that they're actually more reluctant to actually admit error.
Oh,
Like I think we've had instances where people have been kind of like, they just they made a mistake, but instead of, just saying, hey, like to their preceptor, oh, I made this mistake, they are so fearful to actually admit it. I kind of
oh,
wonder, like, do they even teach in school about like how internal reporting systems work? Or I
no,
think that
no,
maybe
they don't.
that just comes out at like
Mm.
when you actually are hired for a job.
No, you know what? I can tell you though, my first experience with incident reporting was actually when I made an error, um, and I was told by my I don't know if it was my manager or the charge nurse at the time that I needed to fill out an incident report on myself.
Oh my god,
Yeah, so
that must have been super scary and intimidating.
So this was back when I was a postpartum nurse. I had been running around all day, giving out medications. And back when I was on the floor, we didn't have a machine that dispensed medication. It was actually just under lock and key. And it was the narcotics were handwritten, right? So you would take out a tab of, let's say, morphine, and you would write down after you had taken that medication out how many tabs were left. So I did that,
Right.
and I still remember the order. It was morphine 5 milligram tab, but I must have taken out the 10 milligram tab because I was going about my day, and then like how we were on the unit was that you had to do a physical count of all the medication, and you nobody could leave if the numbers were off. So I'm just like
Right.
going around finishing up my charting, and everyone's like, "Oh, we can't leave yet because the morphine count is off." I'm like, "What's going on?" So I look at it, and then my heart sinks. And this is how I always feel when I've
No.
made a mistake that I'm like, okay, there's no coming back from this. So I made a mistake. So I gave 10 milligrams of morphine instead of 5. And I was like, oh no. So then I think the charge nurse at the time said, okay, you need to go tell your patient, and then you need to document what you've done, and you need to fill out an incident report. Um,
Right, right, right.
and for me, the hardest part was actually going to tell the patient because I felt so bad. I'm like, uh, so here's what happened. I gave you double the dose of your medication, and some of the side effects might be that you feel more tired than normal. You might feel a little sluggish. We're going to keep an eye on you, but please let us know if you feel different than normal. And she's like, well, she was so nice about it. She's like, oh, don't worry, like things happen. But just going back to your question, when I had to fill in the incident report, I'm like, so what do I write about myself? I'm filling out a report, and then you had to write down the person it was about, and I'm just like, by Sarah, about Sarah, here's what happened, and then I just hit submit. But I guess that's, in the whole grand scheme of things, it could have been a lot worse, but it just speaks to the unit culture of actually filling out reports, and it should be the person that discovers the error that fills it out. And in my case, it
Right,
was
right. Yeah.
technically it was me, so I did that. It was a good learning experience, I feel like, because um, I mean, I don't remember actually getting any follow up, but in general,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah.
did they close the loop on it? Like, did you feel supported when you put in the IRS? Like,
I guess. I mean, I kind of was told what to do, and I just did it. But I was also relatively new at the time, and I don't know that there was any follow up, but I know for more significant cases there was follow up, which is good because it shows that management is listening and the loop is closed, and you get some sort of feedback as to what the outcome of the situation was.
yeah. I mean, it sounds like your experience was better than mine. And again, my experience was similar because I was a nursing student when I made my first kind of medication error. But my situation seemed to kind of be a little bit different where I was actually doing an independent double check of an insulin. And we know that like insulin is a high alert medication. And I had kind of said to my preceptor, okay, so the patient had this amount of insulin, and I was looking at the order, and I was like, okay, so they're on like a sliding scale, and this is what I need to give. And really, what I should have done was really bring in that MAR. And I think people, that is best practice to make sure that you bring that MAR. But sometimes I guess you feel like you're used to that patient. So it was like a gerontology patient that I had over a long period of time for my clinical. So I don't know why. It was a really silly error that I kind of assumed that, yes, the patient's on a sliding scale. I've checked their insulin. This is what it's going to be based on that sliding scale. And my preceptor then was like, "Oh yeah, okay, go ahead and give." And of course, I drawed up the med. I drawed up the med appropriately because of course it's an independent double check, and I administered the medication. But when I went back out of the room to sign the MAR, what I realized was the physician actually took the patient off of the sliding scale and then had like a set order for that patient, and it was less. So I
Oh,
had given my patient more insulin. But then, of course, when I brought it back to my preceptor, like it all just fell heavy on me, even though like she was the person with me doing the independent double check. We obviously weren't doing it in the proper sequence of order or even taking that MAR in to do that double check at the bedside. So she kind of just blamed it all on me. And I was kind of like, oh my God, like, this was horrible. And she's like, yeah, you could have killed the person. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I could have killed the person. And then I just didn't really understand. Like I knew that I made this huge error, and but I just didn't feel like I had the right mechanisms in place to help support me because it was just like, well, you did this. This is your fault. You need to figure it out.
and
I don't even remember if I disclosed to the patient, to be honest. Like I think I was like so mortified, and she was just like, I'll handle it from here. And I was like, oh damn, like I really made this huge mistake. And then actually after that, like we used to do, I think it was like second year nursing, and we had to do these medication quizzes, and you had to get like 80%. And I used to get these like really bad panic attacks, and it was crazy because it was like, okay, so I know I have to do these quizzes to make sure like I won't kill anybody, and like I made this error, so like now the pressure is really on. And I never really had problems with math. I was actually pretty good at math, but I would sit down with these like 10 questions on like dosage calculations and have like a full on panic attack. So like this lady didn't actually help me. It kind of almost hindered me in terms of me being able to just say, hey, I made a medication error. Let me go through that disclosure process, put in the IRS, and then really learn from that mistake, because we know that when errors occur, it's never like one person's fault. There's always that, for that error to kind of occur, there everything has to line up. That Swiss cheese model that they kind of talk about in terms of incidents and harm that actually happens. And we know it's usually like a systemic or system type of error. But I mean, I don't think I was kind of taught in school about, you know, looking at harm and harm reduction. It really wasn't until like my master's degree that we really talked about harm reduction and odds ratios and those different things. And I felt like I could have maybe been better prepared to understand how harm happens in the hospital, because man, like
well, I just thought of
there
a few
there's
things.
so many incidences.
There's a few things I
Yeah.
want to say. So number one,
Yeah, jump in.
yeah, it totally was not on you. I think that, at least in my experience, when there's a student and a preceptor, the preceptor is ultimately responsible for what that student does. And if your
Right.
preceptor literally stood over your shoulder and oversaw everything and then proceeded to say it was your fault, I think that was wrong. Number two, I think her saying that you could have killed the patient is probably one of the worst things she could have said. There's many things she could have said, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're new, things happen. I know you didn't mean to make that error, but instead she just made you feel horrible.
Yeah,
Um,
but nurses are really not good at doing that. Like they're just, I don't know, like I feel like some people they really take new staff and students under their wing, and then some nurses just, it's like it's almost like that person's a burden. It's kind of like, do you forget that you were a student too? Like you had to go through this very same process. But it's just like some people just aren't good at doing that.
well, I think just this might be a topic for another day, but it's almost like
Oh yeah,
they
for sure.
totally remember what it was like, and they're thinking, if I had to go through it and it was this hard for me, then you should have to go through it too. It's almost like they feel like you need to earn your stripes, and
It's bullshit.
yeah, so they just actually make it harder for you. Because
Right.
like I've been in a situation too where I didn't have a great preceptor, and every time I asked her a question, she would go like sigh, like and then
Oh,
she'd get
lovely.
up off her chair and walk really slowly to the room, but she wouldn't let me come into the room. So for example, I had I think I was helping a mom with breastfeeding. It was on night shift, so the baby was cluster feeding. And I was like, I can't get the baby on. Can you help? So she did her sigh, and then she shuffled to the room and didn't tell me to come with her. And then she leaves the room and she's like, okay, it's all done. I got the baby on. I was like, oh, how'd you do that? She's like, just put him on. And I'm like, so thanks for
Right.
the learning opportunity there. Like, I didn't really, that didn't help me at all because if I had to do it again, I would have no new skills, no like
Yeah.
information at all about what you did. And it just like you said, it makes you feel like a burden, and it's not a good feeling. It's just really not a
Yeah,
good way
for
to
sure.
start at all. And also, what I wanted to say is, when you're a staff nurse, I think when you're not in leadership, it's really hard for you to see beyond the individual sort of system. Like when you make a mistake, you do think it's your fault,
Right.
and you don't realize that there are other processes in place that allow errors to occur. And
Right.
maybe, like you said, the Swiss cheese, like everything lined up for that error, but if there was a stronger system in place, none of these would have lined up, and the likelihood of you making the error would have been so much less.
Yep. And I mean, I feel like even just kind of bringing it back. So like what is the internal reporting system? So really, and I could be wrong, but my perception of what the IRS system is really you're looking at harm that comes in or near misses, good catches, the whole variety of different types of errors that you can see in healthcare. And really what you're looking for are trends. You're looking to see like how often are these things happening? Um, because you really want to like we're capturing this data, but we want to do something about it. And I think that it's so important for people to say, okay, we're because you hear all the time, put in an IRS, put in IRS, put in IRS, but they don't know that like we're actually looking at this data to drive quality improvement and change. And it just seems like you put something in, it kind of goes into the ether. And I think most organizations are really trying to move forward to driving quality and to really try to understand kind of what this whole internal reporting system can do. And then even with, oh yeah, go ahead, did you want to jump in and say
Well,
something?
I don't remember the name of the TED Talk, but I remember watching a TED Talk about errors and teams. And what they found is
Yes.
that the highest performing teams actually reported the most errors. And it wasn't
Yep, that's
necessarily,
Amy Edmondson.
yes, it's not necessarily that they made the most errors, but they felt the most comfortable reporting them. And because they reported them,
Right.
the team could actually learn from it and improve their practice. So I think if you guys are listening to this podcast, that is also something you might want to check out if you're interested in this topic at all.
Oh yeah, she's awesome. Yeah, TEDx, and it's Amy Edmondson, but I can't remember the name of the podcast. I'm sure if they search it, they'll definitely find that podcast. It was a fantastic, or sorry, I should say TED Talk.
Hmm.
But like, I think there is a little bit of controversy surrounding the whole IRS. So we tell people to put them in because we talk about driving quality improvement and change. And I think the difficulty is closing that loop. So actually, I heard this quote from actually an accreditation specialist, and he said he saw these people. There was a river, and down this river there were people flowing down the river, and there was this one person that was throwing out life vests to them, right?
Yeah.
Because all these people were drowning in the river and they all need, but they're coming down at this like crazy pace. And this one guy's like throwing out life vests. He's like, I'm trying to save all these people, throw out these life vests. And he's doing them as quickly as he can. And then another person walks up behind the guy and is like, hey, where are you going? And the other guy kind of is like walking up the hill, walking up the river. And he's like, hey, where are you going? Come back down here. Help me throw out some more life vests. And the guy says, well, you know what? I'm actually going to the top to find out why they're falling in to begin with. And I really think for me, that kind of really talked about how we look at how we deal with quality improvement and errors and really looking at a more upstream approach because I feel that the internal reporting system is reactive, right? We're reacting to a near miss or harm incident that we've seen and then making change from it. So that's one way. But I do think we should be more proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one thing, it's really easy on our end to ask frontline staff to put in the reports, but it's actually a lot more work to look at the report and look for themes and make changes and bring those changes back to the staff in a way that's meaningful. Um, because there could be just, hundreds of reports. I think there's just the challenge in healthcare in general that there's just so much going on, right? So you're dealing with a mountain of reports, and somehow you have to get back to the staff that you've done something about it. So whether it's grouping them into themes or just saying like, hey, we've seen a few of these lately, what's going on? It's just having the capacity though as a team to actually tackle all of these reports so that staff don't feel discouraged because I've seen it happen before where we just keep asking them to fill in reports and we don't have the capacity to deal with them. And then they get discouraged. Like, why am I doing this? I never hear anything back. What difference does this really make to me?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's kind of a tricky situation because as much as trying to close that loop, I feel like because we do these quality of care reviews, right? It's like if we are seeing that trend or there was like a major harm event, there is that disclosure process that happens to the patients and families. And then we do actually have like quality of care reflective reviews where we sit down with the team. So we sit down with relevant stakeholders. So nurses who were involved in the case, physicians, social work, whomever was really involved in that circle of care to talk about in like a non confrontational, a confidential forum to say, hey, this happened. Like, how did this happen? Let's talk about all the various different mechanisms that made this error occur. But the thing is, if for example, frontline nurses don't attend these things, they're really missing out because it's such an informative exercise to go through to be like, wow, like this is how this actually led to this harm or this near miss of this patient. But I feel like just in my own experience, I really don't see I see a lot of the senior leadership team sitting in these quality of care reflective reviews, but not so much the nursing staff. And I really feel that it's super important for them to attend. So I don't know if there could be more encouragement from like the management team to say, hey, this is something that you really want to go to. This is how we can learn to even because they're the ones at the front line. They're going to take that information back and say, hey guys, I went to this quality of care reflective review for patient X, Y, and Z, and I learned a lot from it. And here's what I learned. And it'll get other people interested. But I feel like there's a little bit of a culture of that they don't want to go. And I kind of want to dig into like why might nurses not attend quality of care reflective reviews, or what do nurses really believe about the internal reporting system? Because one, we did already mention that, yeah, they don't feel that the system works, but we do know change takes many, many years to be impacted. But then again, why might they not be showing up?
Yeah, and I think just the format of having a quality care review is very foreign to them. So, really understanding that it's not meant to be punitive, it's meant just to look for system errors and ways that we can improve as an organization. So, and if you are a frontline nurse and you're attending these, like you should feel free to speak up because that's really important that you provide that frontline perspective whereas people might not actually know what happened. They're just looking at reports and looking at data, but you are the nurse that was experiencing this, and it's important that you have a voice at the table because what you have to say is just as important as anyone else at the table. So I've been at reviews where the nurses didn't feel comfortable speaking, so they just really sat there, but they had a lot to say. And they didn't say it, so they weren't able to contribute in the way that they probably wanted to. So I would say if you're a frontline nurse, feel like you have a voice at the table, speak up. That's why we want to have representation from all sides. And if you don't feel comfortable, maybe just ask yourself why that is, and if there's something that you could do to change that.
Yeah, and even so, like bring those concerns and questions to the quality team, right? Like, I mean, again, if you feel threatened or you don't feel like you're going to learn anything, like bring those questions to your quality specialist or your quality team and kind of ask, be like, hey, like what does this look like? Is it intimidating? Because I think on the front it seems intimidating, right? It's like you're being called as a witness, but you're not. Like you're being called to tell a story, to say, hey, this is why I did X, Y, and Z. No one's looking and pointing fingers, and really, a good facilitator would shut that down right away. Right away. So like if you got into the quality of care reflective review and someone was like pointing their finger across the table at you, well, you didn't give that med in time, or you this doctor didn't come when I called them and when I paged them, a good facilitator will be able to shut that down very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good for whoever is leading the quality care review to set the tone at the beginning of the meeting, just to say what the purpose of
Absolutely.
this is. Everything we say here is confidential. We are really looking for ways to improve the system and to prevent, say, this situation from occurring again. That's really what it's about. And nurses need to understand that nobody's on trial. We're not here to do that. It's really just to talk about the facts. Um, and whether or not it was a bad outcome, it's just about that. And I don't know. There's so many factors at play here. It's a really challenging thing. But if you attend a review that's really well run, everybody leaves feeling um, better about the whole situation.
Yeah, just feeling that they could take something away from it, and knowing that the whole point is to bring recommendations forward to for quality improvement and to bring about that change. But again, like you were saying, you really got to build that culture of safety and psychological safety yeah, it was about psychological safety to really empower those conversations and to make people to come forward. So I kind of think that, like my own opinion in terms of like my thoughts and just I think it's always I think you should just go. Put your voice out there. I think it's so important for us to be able to speak up. I feel like we don't speak up enough, and we don't really show that support, but I think it's so hugely important that if you're called to a quality of care reflective review, that you go and you lend that voice. You need to lend that perspective and not to be intimidated by the process, because really it's looking at how can we do best for the patient.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yeah. So
and do you think you have anything else to add, or
not right now. Nope. I think we
very
covered all our
good.
bases. So just wrapping up for our listeners, we wanted to let you know that we do have an Instagram account. It's Gritty Nurse Podcast. We also have a Twitter account, and our handle is Gritty Nurse. Our hashtags are Gritty Nurse and hashtag The Gritty Nurse. So if you like this podcast, please like, share, and comment. Let your friends know. And hopefully we'll be doing this again soon.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think we have a lot more to talk about. There's gonna be much more to come.